Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's show is all about women's finances, how to start investing, and how to be prepared for unforeseen circumstances. We'll look at practical considerations that some women overlook when it comes to their finances, such as the importance of owning your own bank account. We'll also discuss the important steps that women can take to manage their finances. Today's topic is building lasting wealth, and I'm joined by Emily Ben-Haim. She's a senior investment counselor at RBC Wealth Management, PH&N Investment Counsel. Emily, welcome to Empowered. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. How are you, Elizabeth?
I'm well, thank you. Let's just jump right in. We've all heard investment advisor, financial planner. What is your role as an investment counselor?
As an investment counselor, my role is to help my clients manage their wealth and achieve their long-term financial goals. I specialize in managing investment portfolios and overseeing my clients' holistic wealth planning, which includes providing them with customized solutions such as financial planning and tax and estate planning. And at PH&N, our focus is really to make sure that we help our clients grow and protect their wealth.
So, who are your typical clients then?
We look after high net worth individuals, families, corporations, endowments, and foundations with over $1 million of investable assets.
So, what are you most passionate about in your role? Because you're dealing with a lot of different people and a lot of different things.
We are. So at PH&N, we form very deep relationships with our clients. For me personally, I'm extremely passionate about educating, empowering my clients to be involved in their wealth management, especially women. And a few years ago, I initiated an event which was intended to be a small, intimate event for a couple of clients in the boardroom to educate women about the one-on-one basics of investing and encourage them to ask questions and build their confidence to become more involved in their wealth. And we ended up having an overwhelming response and had to move it from the boardroom to a significantly larger venue. And that just showed us how keen and eager women were to learn. And we've continued hosting these events ever since.
I think it's important that women speak to women. Through the years, men have typically been in those roles, and women felt like they were being talked down to. And I think it's important now. Here we are, 2025. There are a lot of women in the roles that can help educate. What are the things that most women ask you about? Questions that they don't know about investing?
So some of the main questions that they ask is typically around the different investment asset classes. So what are the types of things that we can invest in? And there's three main types of asset classes. So we have fixed income, which is another word for bonds. And I find there's a lot of jargon in our industry, but there's a lot of words meaning the same thing. There's stocks, which is the same as equities or shares, and there's alternative investments. So just a couple of brief notes on each one of those. So fixed income bonds, you're essentially lending money to a company and they are paying you back plus interest. With stocks, you are owning a share of a business, and like an Apple, for example, and you're hoping that they grow and sell lots of iPhones and your share in the business grows. And alternative investments is a bit of a catch-all phrase for anything which is not the two that I already mentioned. So not the public equities or public bonds. Alternatives is, as it sounds, an alternative to the public investments. And it could be things like real estate, infrastructure, private equity, or private credit, which is the same as bonds and stocks only with private businesses.
So maybe just before we go to commercial break, you might want to explain a little bit about the difference between a private company and a public company.
So a public company essentially just means that it's traded on the stock market, and a private company means that it's still maintained its private status and is not yet publicly traded.
Okay, so before we go to break, I want to when we come back, what I want to do is talk about some of the resources that are available for women, something that they can access to better educate themselves in the management of their finances and wealth, because I think we need to push women just a little bit more to ask the right questions. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more Women in Wealth. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's topic is building lasting wealth. Emily, let's talk about some resources that women can access to better educate themselves in the management of their finances and their wealth.
So the good news is that there's infinite amounts of resources that we can access to better educate ourselves. First and foremost, I would say if you have an investment counselor or professional that you're working with, they are a great resource to go to first because they know you and your personal situation and they can tailor their advice to you. If you're looking for resources online, there is so much out there on financial literacy. A course I particularly like is offered free by RBC in collaboration with McGill University and the Globe and Mail on the basics of finance. In addition to that, there's many articles and resources on any topic that you're interested in. And if you prefer the old-fashioned reading a book versus online, one of my favorite books is Smart Women Finish Rich by David Bach, and he gives some very practical advice on how to save and grow your wealth.
That's great. So let's talk about practicalities.
Okay.
What is a practical consideration that some women overlook? Something that they really need to have, but they don't believe that they do.
So one thing that seems very simple but is very often overlooked is owning your own bank account. And this is probably one of the key pieces of advice that I give any client, women or men. And the reason I say this is because it provides you access and control. And it's perfectly fine to have a joint account as well, but I would still suggest having your own. And I'll give you an example from my experience is I look after a couple that have a joint account and all their assets are held jointly, and they're unfortunately going through a separation. And in theory, all of the assets should be shared, and yes, they're entitled to split the account among between the two of them. But in practical terms, when you're going through a separation, lawyers are involved and it takes time. And sometimes it could take a year to reach a separation agreement. In the meantime, you need to access resources to pay those lawyers, to pay your living expenses. And we now find ourselves in a situation where neither of them can access the funds in the account because they each need to agree for the other to release the funds. And so it's a very unfortunate, stressful situation. And this could have been avoided if, in addition to the joint account, they each had their own separate account with a few assets that they could rely on.
Yeah, and I think it's important because some people think that, oh no, I have a really good relationship and I shouldn't have my own bank account. But we saw during, the lockdown, so many women were at home with their abusers and they couldn't leave because they didn't have their own bank account. So regardless of what type of a marriage you're in, whether it's fantastic or middle of the road or worse, you should always have your own bank account. I'm so happy that you brought that up. I also want to go into why is it important to ensure that you have money set aside for unexpected costs?
It's a great question, Elizabeth. So, unforeseen expenses can happen. We could have car travel, we could have repairs that come up in the home, childcare, we could lose our job and it could take months to find a new one. So, it's really important if we can to try and set some money aside in our bank account, maybe personal bank account. And what we're really trying to avoid is having to use our credit card or dip into lines of credit and start ramping up very high borrowing costs.
And that's a really good point. We hear the words emergency fund on a regular basis. And, it's very easy to put money into an emergency fund. I always start my $5 per day challenge. And I think it's really important, as you said, for us to set some money aside for something like that. I want to talk to you now about having joint accounts with your children. And if we run out of time, we'll continue on after the commercial break. What are your thoughts about having joint accounts with children?
So people tend to add their children onto their accounts for convenience purposes or estate planning purposes. So convenience being if you're traveling and you want your child to help you pay some expenses, or if God forbid you get sick or you pass away, it will quickly go into the child's hands. But some key considerations to keep in mind is that once you add your child onto your account, they are now a legal owner of that account. And even if you trust your child not to make any withdrawals without your knowledge, if they're married, for example, that is now part of the could potentially be considered part of the marital property and subject to division. So there are some solutions to that, which I can continue on after the break.
Sure, great. Thank you so much. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's topic is building lasting wealth. Emily, before we went to break, we were talking about joint accounts with children. And I think this is a really important topic because I know I have a lot of friends whose parents are in their 80s, like early 80s, late 80s. They don't have smartphones. They don't go online. They don't have email addresses. They don't have computers. So a lot of their children are on their accounts joint so that they can pay the bills and write checks and everything else. They've never taken a penny out of there, but they're there to help pay the bills and make life easier. Let's please continue about joint accounts and what your thoughts are.
So definitely, Elizabeth, it makes a lot of sense from a convenience perspective. And I do think that there's merit in having your children in situations as the ones that you described joint on the accounts with you. It is, though, important to just keep in mind the risks that could arise from that. As one that I mentioned was the fact that they are now legally owners of the assets in that account. And if they do have a breakdown of marriage, that could be subject to division and considered part of the marital property. So just things to be mindful of. Another reason people put their children on the accounts is for estate planning purposes, so to avoid probate and to have the assets go quickly into the hands of their children if they pass. Another solution around that, for example, RBC has a unique type of account where you could name your child the beneficiary of your account. So while during your lifetime, you're a complete owner and have full control over the account, but it will flow to them directly after somebody passes.
Oh, that's interesting to
Would
know.
say I would say that in all of these situations, it is really important to rely on your professionals and make sure that you're speaking with them so that you can see if it suits and matches your particular circumstances.
I'm a firm believer in speaking with a professional. We're all really good at our job, but a lot of people need that light to help them with whatever profession it is, whether it's tax or portfolio management, investing, whatever it is. So I'm a firm believer in that. Let's just kind of move on. What are some other important steps that women can take to manage their finances?
In my opinion, the most important thing is to have a plan. And we can get all caught up with life, but we really need to take a step back and think about what stage in life we are and have a plan and what our long-term goals are and budget for that. Something that is really important to consider is retirement. So if we're retiring at around age 65, 70 years old, people these days are living until sometimes age 100. I have a client who's 104 years old. And that is potentially 30 years of retirement that we need to be saving and planning for. And we need to budget for that. And I think oftentimes it's challenging because sometimes our expenses and income are difficult to balance, but it is not sustainable to be spending more than we're making. But on top of that, we also need to now manage for retirement as well. So to your point before, Elizabeth, and your $5 a day challenge, there's some really simple steps that we can take that seem small, but they really add up and they can be really significant. And it's things, for example, bringing your lunch to work instead of buying or ordering it in, or making your own coffee instead of buying it. And that's easily $4 or $5 a day that you could be saving. Review any subscriptions that you have. Do you really still need them all? If there's things that you know that you need to buy, maybe wait for them to go on sale and buy them in bulk. So there's many different things that we can do, but all these dollars add up, and sometimes it could be savings of thousands of dollars in a year. And if you do manage to accumulate that and set it aside, you could potentially consider also investing it in vehicles which are appropriate and will help you build that nest egg for later in life.
I love everything that you just said because I found like I was listening to me because this is exactly what I say to everyone. I think one of the things I'd like to add to that too is check the credit card statements on a regular basis. Then you'll know where a lot of your money is going because, as you said, check your subscriptions. But a lot of people seem to think that, oh, I only have one or two, but couples double up on subscriptions. Typically, people have seven, I believe, or something. The number's ridiculous. So you're right. Take a look and see where you're spending your money. Take a look and see where you can save your money and then use it to invest for your nest egg, for your retirement, and everything else. I don't want to start another question because we are ready to go to break right now, but I'm gonna kind of ask it so you can start thinking about it during the commercial break. For women, I want to get into when women should start investing because so many women say they're too busy, they don't understand it, it's over their head. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with the answer to that question. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's topic is building lasting wealth. I'm joined by Emily Ben-Haim. She's a senior investment counselor at RBC Wealth Management, PH&N Investment Counsel. Emily, before we went to the break, we were talking about, or I was asking, how should we get started? How should women get started investing?
A great place to start investing is taking advantage of the registered accounts. So those tax beneficial accounts that the government of Canada provides us with. Some that may be well known are TFSA and RSP. TFSA being a tax-free savings account where you can grow your money and you get to take everything out and not pay any gains on what you've earned. That's a flexible account. It's a great place to start because you can take money out and put it back in. And it's very tax beneficial. A second type of account is, sorry, Elizabeth?
No, no, please go ahead.
A second type of account is an RSP, which is really geared towards retirement. And I would say you should really, again, speak to your accountant or your investment counselor to see if it makes sense for you because everybody's a bit different. And there are certain nuances around these types of accounts surrounding your tax bracket. If you have US citizenship, does it make sense to do them, yes or no? So I would always urge to speak to a professional. And then there's two other types of accounts which provide tax benefits. One is an RESP, which is an education savings plan, which is a great way to save for your children's education, and you get additional grants from the government for that. And then lastly, the relatively new type of account, which is a first home savings account, where you get tax benefits for saving towards your first home.
I want to talk about, and I know this is a simple question, but I think it's really important. So how does one go about setting up any of these accounts and what are and what are their options?
There's two main ways you could consider investing. One way is you could engage with an investment counselor or an investment advisor and have the account fully managed for you. What that means is that it's our responsibility as investment counselors to oversee the account, make sure it's positioned correctly to meet your individual goals long term. And we are responsible for fully managing it, overseeing it, trading it, and so forth. That's one avenue. The other option that you have is setting up your self-directed account. You can go online, you can set it up easily yourself, and then it's up to you to really choose the investments and do the trading and oversee it. It does come with a large amount of responsibility, and you really have to be comfortable with the markets, understanding what you're investing in, and most importantly, making sure that you have the time to pay attention to it. Because again, we all have our day jobs and busy lives, and it's things that need to be looked at carefully. But I would say that regardless of what avenue you choose to go, my key message is that you have to remember that you're investing for the long term. We're not investing for tomorrow. We're not trying to make a quick gain. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter if you've made another 1 or 2% more or less in any given year on the investments. What's important is that you are growing it in a prudent, responsible way and that it's compounding over time because that will be significant. One of the biggest risks that you can have is impairing your capital because that is very difficult to come back from. So it's really important to weigh how much risk you're taking in your portfolio, and growing it prudently over time is what I call the sleep well at night approach.
I like that. What are some important considerations and questions to ask when selecting an investment advisor?
The two top considerations I hear from clients is trust and communication. And it's very interesting because you would think that the first consideration would be performance and returns. But that I don't often hear that being the top two. And that's probably because it's table stakes when you're selecting a counselor to work with, you expect them to perform and have good investment returns. But trust and communication are the top two. And trust is we have a fiduciary duty to always work in the best interest of our clients. And communication is really making sure that you're involved in the management of the wealth as much as you want to be.
Thank you so much, Emily. Emily says managing finances is not just about numbers, but about empowering individuals, especially women, to take charge of their financial futures and confidence in proven strategies. Hopefully, this conversation inspires our audience to explore the tools, tactics, and resources available to make informed decisions and build lasting wealth. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Bye for now.